for like 3 minutes.
That's okay.
Congratulations, and you're welcome. Okay, yeah. Hello? Hello, everyone. If you are in the exhibit area, please grab a seat. We are going to get started. Although I totally get why you're gonna soak up as much of the exhibit as you can until it comes down, so kudos to you. I love the t-shirts, different variation. What is that one? It looks like, what, yeah, what is it? Yeah, what's that one?
Motion City soundtrack.
Okay, Motion City soundtrack. Cool.
Big gift because not only are they one of my favorite bands, I also collect Viewmasters.
Oh, very cool, very cool.
More information than
Ah, it's I love the t-shirts, love the t-shirts. Speaking of t-shirts, we do have one left, so don't let that t-shirt be an orphan, take it home. So it's already discounted, so check it out. We also have some buttons still for the exhibit. It's a nice kind of DIY feel to it. Anyway, welcome. My name is Wayne Ganaway. I'm the executive director here at the History Center of Olmsted County. I really appreciate you coming out this evening. How many here were here for the exhibit opening almost a year ago? Okay, a lot of you. That was an incredible. Were you here?
Sort of.
Okay, sort of. All right. Well, I'm gonna try and think that through. Okay. Well, we'll go into that later. But what a night it was. I think one of my board members was here, and he said that he probably hadn't seen so many nose rings and tattoos in one place in Rochester ever before. And to think that they were here at the History Center of Olmsted County, astounding, really astounding. And I consider it kind of a triumph, actually. One thing that I was really impressed with, I remember somebody saying was that exhibit and the exhibit opening event was like the high school reunion that they never had, right? Or they never felt. And that's what we like to be here at the History Center, is to provide that platform for people to have community. And that's a perfect example of celebrating a community. But the other sort of bonus is, as they are walking around or as they're checking out the Mosh Pit and Memories exhibit, they can also learn about other parts of Olmsted County, different communities they might not be familiar with, different generations. And so I kind of view the History Center and what we do here as a bridge between different communities and different generations, different cultures. So I thank you for being part of that, whether you're at the exhibit opening or whether it's here this evening. And I hope you continue to be part of that here at the History Center, because that really is what we're about. Yeah, come on in. So without further ado, I'm so excited to have Rich and Abe do this presentation. I guess you could kind of call it a capstone. It's it's a culmination of nearly a year that the exhibit has been up. And I really think it is kind of unique among county historical societies. And I've been following Rochester Recordings on Instagram, If you don't, you really should, because the really cool flyers and T-shirts and info about the Rochester music scene is probably, you're not going to find that a lot of other places. So, Rich and Abe, I'll turn it over to you, and I just want to thank you two for the blood, sweat, and tears. Well, not really the blood, because we didn't actually have a mosh pit here. So. But I want to thank you both and your entire crew for partnering with us and putting up this excellent exhibit. So without further ado, Rich and Abe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Wayne, for that very nice intro. You know, one of the things that we had talked about when we started doing this was that, you know, as Wayne kind of touched on, history doesn't have to be something that happened 100 years ago or 70 years ago. It's some, you know, stuff that happened 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. It's continuing all the time. So to be able to have this exhibit in a place like the History Center here is awesome, because you know, a lot of the stuff we did back in the 90s and 2000s didn't get a lot of support from the city at large. So to have this sort of support now is great. And I just want to thank the History Center on behalf of myself, Abe, and Josh for allowing us to do this.
Do you want the clicker? Do you want me to do
Oh. Also, something to point out, we we didn't really prepare much for this. I mean, we did, but this isn't going to be like a rehearsed TED talk or anything like that. We just met Josh.
Yeah, thanks for the ride here.
But before we start, I did want to say one other thing. Thank you for joining us this evening for a semi-deep dive into the underground music scene of Rochester as it existed in the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. We're going to talk about the importance of this time period, mainly as it relates to Rochester, but a bit more broadly in the sense of like independent music and how it was made and promoted and things of that effect. In addition to that, we're going to highlight a few specific bands and artists who made a significant impact. Mosh Pits and Memories focuses mainly on the mid-1990s to the mid-2000s, because that was the time that we were involved. Obviously, the music scene stretches way farther back and continues to this day. We had planned to do sort of a look at the Playmore as the through line through all of this, but there is way too much information there. And someone else already did a great article on the Playmore that you can find on the Historical Society website. So with that said, I think we can start. Go ahead.
All right. So you touched on this a little bit, but why is this time period it's so important to Rochester music? And again, this is a lot of coming from our own personal experience. And then some of the people that are here in the audience and then helped us put up the exhibit. So there's just that struggle of the kids and young adults to feel a part of the community when Rochester was named the #1 place to live. It was actually, I think, several years in a row, maybe off and on for several years, named the #1 place to live. And yet some people just didn't feel like they belonged, or they had a place that they could go or gather, or, you know, just do things. So really this exhibit and also the accounts when you follow us like on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, came out of a real DIY culture. A lot, mainly just kids and young adults making this happen. As far as writing the music, booking shows, making flyers, getting the word out. Internet was just becoming available around the time this kind of part of the scene started, so we really didn't have those outlets at least in the early parts of this scene. And obviously there was no social media and no smartphones, so it really was word of mouth, local record store, your kind of group of friends that were getting the word out. Take it from here. Sure.
So before we get too into the time period that we're talking about, let's do a quick history before the 90s and 2000s. Wellhaven Music was putting out records of garage bands in the 1960s. Bands like the Byrds were playing the Playmore. Johnny Cash and the Beach Boys were playing the Mayo Civic Center. So, independent music, local music, garage bands have existed since it's existed in the world. Rochester was no different than any other city when it came to that stuff. Some other stuff happened in the 70s, I think. Mostly bar bands and cover bands, probably some original music, but who cares about that? Moving into the 80s, Rochester kind of followed the trend of glam rock becoming huge. Bands like Bon Jovi, who famously shot a music video at the Civic Center in, I want to say 1986, 87. We're playing Metallica, Whitesnake, Kiss, Cheap Trick, all those bands played Rochester. And we had our own sort of glam rock bands. Kid Whiplash was sort of the big local glam rock band with Rick Stack and whoever else was in it. He's the only person that I know. But yeah, those shows mainly took place at like the Armory and the Fairgrounds, as you can see from these flyers.
All right, so we're getting into the 90s. Looks like we had a couple of posters missing, but this still gives you an overview of some of these early what were billed as alternative rock or alternative shows. So you're kind of seeing some of them still at the Armory. There was a very short-lived venue called the 921 Club. So you see like Vegetable Man is a name that some people may recognize. They were around for a long time. Neurotoxin was a heavier band. Chrome Yellow is one that shows up a lot on some of these flyers, and they were I hadn't heard of them before this project, honestly, but it was similar to me, influenced by like a Husker Du kind of sound. So they were kind of like on the cusp of where we really focused this exhibit on.
And then around 1993, exactly 1993, November 12th, 1993, is when these alternative music parties started happening, which was started by John Austinson and Chad Traum, two students at RCTC, started throwing these shows with touring alternative bands and then putting local bands on it. So you had bands like Tang, Grunt, Raw Buddha, Contort, playing with bigger bands like Guzzard, which was a band on Amphetamine Reptile Records. And you would get really diverse bills where you would have death metal bands playing with pop punk bands playing with Ruka Salt, grunge bands.
We'll go to this and we'll come back. So you can see here, so death metal, Contort, Black River Falls, Blues, Sub One, that was like pre-Rosin, Pyre, kind of more acoustic rock, Ruka Salt, big name for our area. When John Wolstead was here at the opening of the event, he was interviewing us, and he was kind of looking at these different posters that we have up there and asking questions about it and stuff. And I remembered as we were kind of being interviewed about it, I'm like, I was at that show. I was like 15 or something, so I couldn't drive. And it was a lot of bands, and I had to go home before they played.
Those are really good shows. They were really good.
So I saw like all of them, most of them, and I didn't see Bruce, so that was kind of a bummer. I still remember that. But yeah, Wool, nationally known band. Yeah, so that's some of some of the sort of bigger, or at least more well-known national bands that were coming through. We'll go back here. We'll maybe start back here. You want to pick it up there?
So like we said at the beginning, we focus, the Rochester Recordings Mosh Pits and Memories is mainly focuses on the 1994 to 2004 timeframe. Figured that was just a nice, concise little period of time to look at. But you had bands like Tang, Raw Buddha, and Grunt that sort of bridge the gap from the sort of pre-94 era into that alternative music party era and beyond. They kind of set the foundation for what a lot of the other bands that came after them sort of would follow suit. Here's just another, probably one of the bigger bands that played at the Playmore was Babes in Toyland from Minneapolis, who were huge for a spell in the 90s. And I was at that show, Josh.
great show,
Yeah. Abe, were you there, or was that another one you had to go home early?
I would remember if I had to go home early. I just don't remember that show.
Steve Ball screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember there being probably 400, maybe 500 kids there. It was packed. Like you felt like the floor was going to fall into the basement. It was that
Well, that was
that many kids just
and
bouncing.
that floor literally did bounce.
Yeah. But so to go back to that for 1 second, so all of these bands that were playing, some of them in Rochester, some of them not. It was all this, underground small band circuit. So, bands like Nirvana, Green Day, Blink-182, they all started out the same way, playing these smaller alternative venues. Knights of Columbus's, Legion Halls, places like the Playmore. Green Day famously played a Sioux Falls basement on one of their first tours. So, this wasn't just Rochester, this was national, and it was national artists touring all over the place.
I can pick it up here. So how do people learn about these shows? We talked a little bit about sort of being right on that cusp of the internet being widely available. So really you had record stores, college radio, flyers, word of mouth. We have on one of the, at least, I don't know if it's on one of the Rochester Recordings accounts. We've got an audio clip. There was like a Broadway Records commercial or something. Like, you had your sort of traditional outlets, but this wasn't mainstream enough where you're going to see it on, like, you turn on the TV or whatever, or turn on like a regular radio station and hear about it. So it was a lot of kind of underground, again, DIY kind of stuff. So you can see there's like a Broadway Records. So this is the grand opening of when they relocated. And then this is a Bored to Death radio show interview.
I think that was Rick's radio show, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
89.9.
Yep. College radio.
Yep. And then there's that quote there, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so to kind of give you an idea of the disconnect between sort of the mainstream popular music versus what we were kind of doing. When we started doing this, we got contacted by a former DJ who worked for Z-Rock, KROC, Laser 101. And they were sending all of this stuff of like these big shows that they worked. And I kind of explained what we were doing. It was more about like, underground independent bands. And they had said, I guess I can't help you with your quote unquote underground. I was about bringing big shows to town, cannot say what you're speaking of was on our radio radar as we were about a mass audience. So apparently 400 kids.
They told us the problem.
Yeah. Apparently 400 kids at a Babes in Toyland show is not enough of a mass audience for popular radio. But that just sort of, again, is another example of what we were sort of not up against, but sort of the opposite of. Like, it wasn't huge arena shows.
So, we had, we kind of had a hard time like labeling this slide, but just the concept of like artistic, creative, skateboard, punk outliers. You have these people that maybe weren't in sports or other groups, or maybe they were, but still had these other outlets or these other friends with these other activities that they wanted to be a part of. So even with like, some shows on weekends, the kids and the young adults still struggle to find, to kind of feel to be a part of the community. When Rochester was, being labeled as this #1 place to live. And it really is an ongoing issue, going back decades. There's a couple articles here that kind of highlight some of the, kind of issues or confrontations that did occur, especially like in the Peace Plaza area.
And one of the things with it, a lot of us hung out at the Peace Plaza when we weren't at shows or in school. A lot of the people in this sort of community, in this scene, maybe came from unstable homes, not great environments to hang out in. So they kind of had their, chosen family that they found. And yeah, there was maybe some issues that the Peace found, but it was, the city made such a big deal about it, and really, it was mostly kids skateboarding and playing hacky sack, maybe a little bit of weed smoking, swimming in the fountain, but it really wasn't a huge problem. But like I said, this is stuff that goes back to the '60s when the city was clamping down on teen dances at the Playmore for like smoking and stuff like that. It's just the adults are always going to have a problem with the kids, no matter what.
So these are a few snapshots that were, passed on to us from that time frame. So you can see skateboarding and hanging out, kids of all backgrounds. And then, we'll just touch on, like, sometimes it did cause friction with local law enforcement. I mean, I can't think of any major stories, but just like minor, situations or whatever. So we have a video here. I'm gonna, put the mic on mute and hit play over here for you.
So this is, just to give a little context to this, this is the video that was shot outside of the Knights of Columbus in, I want to say 1994. Thank you, Josh. By Paul Sewell, and he's basically just asking a bunch of people who are at this show if they feel that the city really cares about the youths in the community.
You think like the town cares about your people? No, absolutely not. They want to take everything, all the monetary resources. The image, yeah, it's image. That's all they fucking high people care about. Because otherwise, they bring in different bands and set different stuff for us to do, but they don't. So. Yeah, I think they really care. It's a good point. How far they really care. If it really actually. Well, that's a problem with the city to promote healthy, clean environment. It's just. This is for people to go. And I think all the board members and big people and not just think about the kids instead of their reputation. People these kids are doing this instead of doing drugs or alcohol or being in gangs. They're reprimanded for doing these things. It's just beyond. It'd be nice to take some. Take the time to market the image.
So there you go. Lots of footage of Mike talking about something.
All right, so we did have lots of venues though that were during this time frame that were in and out, available for kids to, and young adults to put stuff together. So next Columbus, the 921 Club, Playmore, Love Ugly with Mike Savage.
Which was sort of an underground club, and then it became a legitimate bar eventually.
Yep. Bored to Death, Key Lions, 7th Street House, Manorville Social Club, Cyber Q / Jerry's Billiards, and even Broadway Records. So we use a few pictures.
There's Cyber Q up in the top left, 7th Street House next to it. Exterior of the Love Ugly on the bottom left, and then one number principal at Broadway Records.
And then we also had kind of a component of this where not only were people putting on their own shows and making their own flyers, but also doing their own recordings. Getting a professional recording was expensive and not as accessible. And so I brought a few pieces up here from the exhibit, and then like just this as an example where a lot of times it's just like a 4-track. So you have like this, you have just like a regular cassette tape that you put in here. And then you could get a total of 4 tracks out of this. If you were savvy, you would maybe bounce 3 down to 1 and get more out of it and hope that the mix turned out okay. But at least, you know, that's kind of what we were working with, right? I mean, now, you know, there, you've probably seen online like memes about everything that's in your phones, right? And you can do so much with the phones, and obviously, you know, a computer or something that's this size, now you can do has lots of processing power and editing power and all that. We didn't have that then, so we had 4 tracks, reel-to-reel tapes. I remember my band in our practice space, we had just like a reel-to-reel tape player that we used. Just, it wasn't great quality, mainly because of our performance in the concrete environment, but nonetheless, it was something that we had as to record with. So the local recording studios, there was one called RP Studios in town. A guy named Bob Hockenberry ran that. And I remember my experience with him was like, looking back, he's probably like, who are you? Like, we did our recording on a 4-track, didn't really know what we were doing, brought it to him because we wanted to dupe off some cassettes and asked him to make it sound better, which you can only do so much with what we gave him. And then Last Minute Records, using, they had like the Studio Academy studio, Woodshed Studios was a local, and then Pachyderm was and still is, I think it was out for a little while, but still is a professional studio nearby in Cannon Falls. There's the Warehouse in La Crosse. So you had kind of a range, but again, not a lot of high quality facilities available. So a lot of times you just kind of had to do it yourself, scrape together a budget for those recordings. So we've got, should I talk a little bit about these, or?
Yeah, Josh, you want to say anything about that?
Yeah.
About like
Want
the
to talk about
last minute
last minute
CDs and stuff?
CD, the last minute CDs?
Especially this one. So, the Gnostic Evolution CD is kind of when it started the whole thing. Most of this was recorded in Mike's basement on that Mac.
So this would be Mike Thompson.
Yeah, this was I just did his mom's basement, and yeah, like it sounds like it was recorded in his mom's basement, but it has a nice little charm to it. So there's like and then that one was recorded,
And that was
that was up in the studio.
so just real quick, to one other thing about that comp, that was sort of the first collection of all local Rochester bands. Sort of a sampler of, you know, you had pop punk bands and you had acoustic artists and you had metal bands. It was
A little bit of, I think, piano in there. And then
Yeah.
you can't see very well from here, but in the center of this CD is the sign that says Rochester, Minnesota, best place to live in America. And then it has some news articles. Teens say merchants talking out both sides of the mouth. And just sort of, I guess, like the academy there, is that the right word? The sort of,
Yeah.
the city and the real experience of some of these kids.
Oh, so yeah, and then, so we did a couple other CDs. Basically, if you were in a band and you wanted to be recorded, and like, you were fine. Like, it didn't cost you anything, like, he just kind of did it of his own time. But then we did the second compass CD, which is Stagnation in Progress, and the sound quality from that one to this one is amazingly different. The equipment got better, so yeah.
Yeah, and actual.
It was-
yeah.
That's that one, yeah, it's that one, yeah.
Yeah, the studio.
And this
Yeah.
Just for reference, the studio was in the building that is now the Repertory Theater.
Oh, yes, like, so for those online, if you didn't catch that, the studio, academy was in what is a building that is now the.
But the studio was a separate building. And I think they tore it down, didn't they?
No, it's still there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
No, they tore it down.
Well, the studio part is gone, but no, the building is, that building that the Rep
Yeah,
Theater is, was what the studio was. But they took out all the walls in the studio, but it's.
Gotcha, okay,
So.
but yeah, it was really quiet in there.
Lots of carpet.
Lots of shit.
Yeah, I mean, you can see, it's like on the walls.
Yeah.
It looks like something right out of the seventies, like, you can see in that top right there, so, yeah.
We always question whether it had been re-carpeted after the flood, because.
Oh, yeah.
What's in the flood.
Yeah. What's the floating floor, so it didn't matter.
All right, so we'll do. Yeah, so this is all, I mean, CDs are digital, but we're really going from sort of like an analog world into a digital world with online and streaming MP3s. So in the early 2000s, the recording and distribution technology did continue to grow and improve. And some of this analog media was being either complemented by or replaced with some of these digital streaming formats. So you have like mp3.com, MySpace, LimeWire, Napster, and this really also changed how people were able to kind of get the word out. It was another avenue, another outlet with message boards, MySpace, and you're beginning to see posting online in addition to and sometimes in replacement of like people putting up paper flyers.
And one sort of interesting thing, speaking of mp3.com, there was a local band called Illfist, which was sort of a rap metal, new metal band. And at one point they had the #1 song on mp3.com. The #2 song was by a band called Limp Bizkit. And I think #3 was a band called, it might have been Papa Roach or something like that. So at one point they beat out those two hugely successful popular bands to have. So, you know, it kind of leveled the playing field a little bit when it came to online distribution.
We're just gonna do a quick spotlight or highlight a few of the bands from this time frame. So just a sampling of some of the influential bands from this period. There are a lot of bands, there are a lot of different styles. So this is again not exhaustive. So first up, we'll touch on Tank. And you were just saying like they were an integral part of the indie rock scene. And in our little attempt to somehow sum them up, they're a loud yet melodic sound incorporated elements of punk, emo, and alt rock that you could both sing along and scream along to. Formed in around 1992, disbanded in about 1998. Played dozens of shows. They had their own self-released Bazag cassette in 1993. And do you pronounce it posthumous? It looks like posthumous, but I think it's posthumous. Posthumous, eponymous CD.
The language lesson here tonight. I hope you're taking notes.
Released by Last Minute Records in 1999. This included sessions from Pachyderm and Cannon Falls and the Warehouse in La Crosse. So again, this was a kind of a DIY. The recordings were done actually at good facilities. And then a little bit later, they put together, combined them together and basically handmade the CDs and distributed them that way.
And they were kind of, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys kind of it seemed like you did a lot more than a lot of the other bands. Like, you know, you were sending songs out to college radio and you were being included on compilations and, you know, you had merch and you were putting out cassettes and CDs and sort of seemed to really like set the bar pretty high.
That's correct. I think a lot of people in the band, especially Jeff. Let's talk about Jeff here for a second. So, Jeff had a lot to do with it, the singer in the band. He played in other bands on the West Coast and such. So when he came back, and this was the second official band that I was in, but he brought a lot of that DIY band stuff this way and contacts. So he's like, hey, you know, we're getting some traction here. Why don't we send this out? Or, you know, let's talk to the record store. And then we get support there. And then people started contacting us saying, we've heard of you. Hey, you want to put something on this comp? And you want to send something to us? And then we're like, hey, you want to put out some shirts? And, you know, hey, we need to put out some shirts so we can then put out some cassettes. So then we can, you know, fix the van to go to a show.
This is all pre, you know, crowdfunding and,
Absolutely.
you know, when you
This is how
did it
you
yourself.
got money to do it yourself. That wasn't about making money. It was about getting enough money to put out your stuff. So a lot of that came from just the push of some support that we had from people outside of our band, as well as people in the band saying, hey, let's just do this. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, Joe.
Yeah, sure. Hold on. You'd like to add this?
I'm not skipping this. Hello. Yeah, Joe from Broadway Records. He's the reason that we put that first tape up.
Yeah, he's
That was
like,
all him.
let's front the money. If you want to put these out. We at the time we were, you know, kids, and we didn't have enough money to buy the materials. And he's like, oh, we'll just front the money if you just get them duped and put it out there. I'm like, okay. So he did. And then they sold, and we're like, that was cool. Yeah, let's make some
That was a
shirts.
big deal.
Yeah. Big deal.
Cool.
So,
Do you want to talk at all about the pachyderm or warehouse experiences or?
yeah, there was a few studios here and there. But I think Pachyderm was kind of the biggest one. You know, Nirvana recorded there, Live Throne Copper was recorded there, a bunch of bands, great studio. But that came from, I think it was a contact with our quote unquote manager at the time. Knew somebody who knew somebody that knew Pachyderm. So we got a really good rate. They're like, yeah, come on in, we'll record you. When I got there, I was just blown away. You know, the board was the one that was in Electric Lakeland. So
Indoor swimming pool.
indoor swimming, movie stars, carpeted walls. It was a really cool place. The sound was amazing. The board was amazing. They had gear that I'd never seen before. It was like a real recording experience. I think the warehouse in La Crosse had some good gear, but not to that caliber or that level by any means. And it was one of the first times that when we recorded, we used to record just live, you know, except vocals. It was just live. Wrote down if Mike was speeding or if I missed a note, it was there.
That never happened.
That's memory serves.
Drummers are always.
On time. But that was one of the first times that we did overdubs and, you know, play to a click track and any of that. So it was something different, you know. In the big leagues now, boys. Not really, but it was different, you know, than just sitting with a 4-track, which was some of the next step was for our 4-track. So
That was probably all 4-track, I think, from Sugarwood.
some of
No, cassette from.
cassette 4-track.
And you recorded on tape, not
Yep.
digital. No.
It was a tape.
Mhm.
But there was again a big difference from all the studios that we kind of went from, you know, Sugarwater to Balloon Man in Minneapolis, remember that guy? And to the warehouse in La Crosse, and then, you know, Pachyderm was just, you know, this is a studio. So that was a treat, and we did get to go back and record some other stuff there. But it was really cool.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, we do have, in addition to some, like the Tang CD, the Zag cassette, a couple Tang t-shirts. There is a couple of the original reels from the Pachyderm session in the exhibit there. I think the exhibit goes through this weekend yet. And we had those, I had reconnected with Brandon, sometime early 2000s. I was living in Nashville and brought the tapes there to be transferred into Pro Tools. So that again, 2-inch analog tape, I think 15 inches per second. It was either 15 or 30. And I was just intern, so I wasn't really able to go in there, but I had somebody there transfer the tracks. So we actually have the original tracks for, it's not all of the songs. I think one of the tapes got lost and or was destroyed or something. Couldn't find it, but that's at least a chunk of the songs are still there.
Actually, we have that.
Ooh, another piece of the puzzle falls into place.
I also hear that there may be the warehouse, it was on, sounds like it was on 1-inch analog, that may still be around as well, so, yes. We're gonna move on. I was gonna do some audio clips from some of these, but it's like, how do you pick it, something that's representative? And then I'm like, I just made like 30-second audio clips of these bands, and I'm like, okay, that's like 15 seconds of 2 songs. I'm just gonna skip those.
That's fine.
Yeah. We have lots of content out there on our various accounts.
Josh, you want to talk a little bit about Paul?
Yeah, we'll talk about
And
Yeah.
Paul was well, I'll let Josh.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, like as you can read there, Paul fronted Rabuda, and so Paul was a big influence on me and my band. He actually recorded our first cassette for us.
What was your band?
Toe Jam. You're looking at me say it. All right.
Oh, man.
When we recorded 13, 14, something like that. And it sounds like we're 13 or 14 on it.
Yeah.
And then but yeah, so we recorded that, and we were kind of upset, like I don't want to say like upset, like I know obsessed is the wrong word, but really looked up to like Rabuda, Tang, Grunt, like those were the 3 bands that we all really looked up to, and we kind of took that whole DIY aspect of it to our own. So it's like without that, we never would have done the whole last minute thing, you know. So but yeah, no, Rabuda's a great band. Miss Paul, so he would have loved this. So this would have been his thing. He probably would have been up here giving the speech right now. So
And he probably had tons more material.
oh yeah, he would, yeah.
We have some of the stuff that some video that he had recorded.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, we have some video that Paul had recorded.
That's a screenshot video.
Yeah, of Robert at the 921 Club.
He did always have his camera.
Yeah, like I said, that Knights of Columbus stuff was from him. There's an entire tape of him just walking around Knights of Columbus. It was a Tang show and one of Toe Jam's first shows.
Yeah.
And he's just walking around talking to people the entire time. And it's so fun to watch, like how just supportive and into all of
Quite
it
the social
was.
butterfly too.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, do we have that up on anything that cassette?
There is one of the songs from this cassette is on the YouTube. So we have kind of a sampling. I mean, there's so much material, right, from just various bands over the course of roughly, it's a little more than 10 years that we have that, like, as far as the time frame. So one of these songs is up there.
There's also I think 2 videos on the YouTube
Okay.
page. So yeah.
And we're doing our best to we're archiving and transferring and trying to at least clean up a little bit these cassette recordings. And there may be some stuff in the future, potentially putting more out there. But that Well, that's all I'll say about that for now.
Yeah, we'll save that for the end.
All right, relatives, so I think it's back.
A little bit about that.
So there's Toe Jam, but then there's relatives. Tell them what that.
Yeah, so relative was just Toe Jam because we thought the name was dumb. Well, it's just, we kind of grew out of the name. I mean, it's not a bad name for like a little punk rock band, but when we quit playing that, start playing other stuff, like, you know, it's kind of hard to have a song about the third world when your band name's Toe Jam. It could just be, so we changed it in '98 and we put up this CD. This was we went and recorded this up in, where was that? Ridley, apparently. And after we did that, it wasn't the most pleasurable experience. I mean, the sound quality is good and all that. The sound recorded, just the whole. So I think Mike got it in his head that he could just do it. So like, the guy had a computer, Mike had a computer. Okay, let's just do it ourselves. That way we don't have to feel uncomfortable. So yeah, then we recorded the Gray EP, which not the EP, the LP. And that was fun. I don't know.
That one actually, that's replicated. This is like a CD. The first one was CDR, right? But this one, I think
that
you
was
actually
the
had
actual we had pressed,
like pressed,
which is why everything's gray, because it was cheap.
Economics 101.
Oh, yeah.
Being in a band.
So yeah, and then we broke up in 2002. I think we played the last show at your house.
3. No, 2002.
2002, yeah, no,
Yep.
it was January.
Yep, it was our
So we
first show,
played-
your last show.
We played our first set as Toe Jam, and then we did the last set as Relative, and that was the last time up until 2005 or 7 we played together at Kathy's. We played one song, all 3 of us.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, and then they put out an album in 2006. Mike and Brian did, and then they broke up after that. So
I do want to point out, you said that it's tough to write songs about the third world in a band called Toe Jam.
Yeah.
Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses was in a band called the Farts in the 80s, and they were super political.
like,
Yeah, that's
using Guns N' Roses.
yeah, that's true.
That was Toe Jam. Not the same.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so another band, this band called the F-Ups. To this, well, maybe not to this day, but in this time period at least, they were the only band that got signed to a major label and put out like quote unquote real CD with distribution and all of that stuff. They're on the Warped Tour. They toured with, I don't know why this band keeps coming up. They toured with a band called Papa Roach. But you know, they were kind of the band that broke out. They had songs on video games and you know, played big shows and played festivals, and that was something that no one up to that point had really done before. So it was a real cool thing to see. At the time, I was mad jealous of them.
Yeah.
But you know, in hindsight, that was pretty awesome. It was cool.
All right, Apocalypse or Gabriel and the Apocalypse. Talk about them.
Yeah, they are still a band. It's been over 20 years and they are still putting out new music. They are still playing shows. They are still doing some touring. They're based out of Minneapolis now. But yeah, I think out of every band in this sort of time period, they're the ones that have kind of made a life out of it, out of this one entity. There are dozens of people who were in bands who continue to play music, but you know, in different variations, different genres. They've kind of stuck to their guns and they're still doing the goth industrial metal thing. So God bless them.
Right, Villains. Now we're getting kind of a little more on toward the back end of this time frame that we're talking about here.
Yeah, Villain was probably the 3. Well, Zach Meyer was also in it for a spell, but Craig, Jay, and Jared were probably the three most talented musicians in the city at this time. And they made really interesting music that was influenced by like the Minutemen and Rush and jam bands. It was like everything that you could think of, they kind of threw together, and somehow it made sense and was really catchy and really good. My band, I was in a band called the Fucking Americans, and we played with them all the time. And we had this little rivalry, good natured rivalry, but they were great. And it was always awesome, and it sucked to play with them because there was no way you could top them, but they were always super fun.
All right, so we have just again, for lack of a better headline, people from the scene who went on to bigger things. So you know, you touched on a little bit about some of the success of like the F-ups or the apocalypse still going on and being nationally known. Maybe you'll take the first one, I'll take the next one.
Yeah, so there's Jorda Sanga, who was someone who just went to a lot of shows. She was an acoustic artist, later moved to Minneapolis and was in a couple pretty well-known bands. She was also my homecoming day one year, so just saying. But she was a contestant on The Voice, on Rockstar NXS. She owns an extremely successful bar in Brooklyn. She just had a baby, but you know, she was on TV. Like, that's pretty cool. And she was on TV with like Christina Aguilera, also pretty cool.
James Nubby, he was in a band called the Butternuts with Jay. So Bill and the guy in the middle there, Jay. That was I think it might have been Jay's first band. They were a three-piece called the Butternuts. And James was active in theater and in music. He was also a gymnast, so he actually went on to basically be one of the directors at Cirque du Soleil. With the pandemic and things that happened there, he changed gears and he's currently the director of the circus at the University of Montreal.
And he was just named CEO of Drag One Entertainment, which does these big spectacle shows like Cirque du Soleil and whatever on ice and things like that. Johnny Pemberton, who he was a Lourdes graduate and played in some bands there. He was one of the people who started the Rock and Sania concert series at Lourdes. He moved out to LA, became a successful stand-up comedian. He's been in movies like Ant-Man, 21 Jump Street. He's on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, New Girl.
It's just not Fallout.
He's just said, yeah, the new Amazon show Fallout. He's on that. So yeah, and again, just someone who started out playing in little indie rock bands here in town. I'll take the last one. Ed Erikel, super talented photographer. He started out shooting pictures at like CyberQ and American Legion, and he shot One Number Principle. He shot Relative. He shot my band. He was everywhere. Always had his camera. And he now moved to LA and is a still photographer for movies like G.I. Joe Snake Eyes and The Hurt Locker. He did the X-Files reboot. One of the cool things about this is, about the Rochester Recordings thing, is when, you know, Josh started this back in 2014. And then him and I were kind of doing stuff for a while, and then it kind of, you know, we got busy with other things. When the pandemic hit, we started up again and really started, you know, kind of going after things and posting a lot. Ed was one of the first people I reached out to, and I was like, hey, do you have anything from this time period? I know you shot a lot of pictures. And he was like, yeah, I'll send you 2 zip files. And it was every picture he had ever taken at the Love Ugly and his entire archive of shows pre-Love Ugly. It was thousands of pictures, and most of them had never been seen before. So that was amazing to get, and we've sort of slowly been posting those and putting those out there. But it was, he was just like, whatever you want to do with these, you have my blessing. Like, if you want to do a book, if you want to, whatever, just use them, let people see them. So that was cool. And then finally, Caitlin Morgan, she's an actress in Daisy Jones and the Six. She was in Hawaii Five-0. She's another person who was just at every show, was super supportive of all the bands. And, it's cool to see people like that come from here and go out and do things like that. But aside from that, I mean, there are people who played in bands who are now doctors, lawyers, business owners. A lot of people have moved overseas and done cool things in different countries. So, it's one of the things that I think we all sort of fought against during this time was like, oh, it's the dirties, it's the losers, like the punk kids. And, look at all these people who went on to be super successful with that sort of stigma thrown upon them as teenagers. So, it just shows you don't always judge people based on how they look.
I just kind of wanted to add on to something that you just said there. Coming from somebody that was super shy as a kid, no self-confidence or anything, playing in shows and being out in front of people really brought me out of that.
Yeah.
Be with like-minded
Same.
people to say, okay, I'm just like you, you're just like me, we're people. And that gave me confidence to try other things and do other things. So for those, there's nothing wrong with the traditional student that goes through school and has academic success and goes to college and reaches further success. But for those that come from a non-supportive home or something of that nature, this gave them a place and a belonging in a chosen family.
Mm-hmm.
That we all supported each other in this way, which helped us to be confident enough to try other things and to get success in a different way. So to that point, yes.
Yeah, man, talk about a mic drop moment. We could just end right there, but I think we have a couple more things.
I can take my place.
All right, so we're just kind of a real, we kind of talked about past, present. We didn't really go back too far, but especially when you touched on like the Playmore earlier, that has a deep history. And then we're still, again, this history and time and life, it's continuous, right? So we just kind of arbitrarily picked those bookmarks. But it started before what we have been focusing on, and it's continued on. A lot of people that have been a part of the scene have been in other bands and done other projects since then. Some of the current local venues include Thesis, Tree Dome, Taco Jed. We currently have a couple record stores, Hidden World, Tree Dome, Rochester Records. There's a high quality studio in town now, Carpet Booth. You were just there.
Zach, who runs that place, is great. He was in a band.
He was part of the scene.
Yep, he was in a band called Manhattan back in the day, who were great. And yeah.
Do the dedication.
Yeah, so we do want to, as is always the case, there are, always people who you lose along the way. And we have a dedication wall in the back there for the exhibit. We do want to, once again mention Paul Sewell, who was so instrumental in so much of this. Zach Meyer from Villain, who was a great person. John Getty Arleth, who was at every show. He always just ended up everywhere, no matter where you were. He somehow found him, like made his way there. Jordan Van Hook, who is a great sound engineer. Eric Donaldson, who's the Love Ugly co-founder. Kat Berg, who was another person who was at all of the shows. Cindy Peterson. I think that's how you spell her name. I've seen it a million different ways, but Mike and Aaron's mom, who was super supportive of you guys and really everyone.
Any band that came to our house.
Any band, yeah. And then within this past year, we lost Mike Pinner, who was Charlie Brown's cousin. I played in a few bands with him. one of the nicest, most hilarious people you would ever meet. And then just this week, we found out that Jesse Pearson, who was a photographer and teacher at Studio Academy, passed away. So, yeah, just want to make those people known because they were important to all of us and left a big mark. So
Yeah, I just wanna, we did have, we do wanna have at some point soon here, like a question answer, if there's anything,
Yeah,
Mike and
we're gonna-
Laura are here.
Mike and
to-
Laura
To
in a
help
couple
answer some
minutes.
questions or talk about some more, things in depth. But we also just wanted a quick share that you can follow us on various accounts.
yeah, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Another way you can support us is just tell people about us. We are slowly working on a documentary about all of this, where we're compiling all this footage, all these pictures, all of this stuff, to sort of tell a more complete version of this story. So if you have pictures, if you have flyers, if you have video or recordings or old merch, if you have relatives, older brothers, you know, nieces, nephews who might have been involved in this, let us know, tell them about us. We currently have about 200 plus recordings that we've collected. Some of it is here, some of it was widely available, some of it was done in very small pressings, some of it's never been released. It's just demos and recordings that people have been nice enough to give us. We have about 100 videos of various shows from this time period. We have compiled a database of as many shows as we can find documentation of from the early 90s to the mid 2000s, and even going back now to the 80s and into the 2010s. But we have about 750 shows that we've been able to document, and thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures and flyers. So we have a lot, but there's always more out there. There's gaps to fill. So, you know, help us out. If you have stuff or know anyone who can contribute, we're happy to give it a loving home, even if it's digital copies. That's totally fine too.
All right, so we've got Mike and Laura here, as a part of the panel. Are you okay just coming up and maybe
Yeah,
just
I mean-
sharing a few things, and then we can have anybody else?
Josh, if you want to come out
And Mike.
yeah,
I mean, I'll answer questions.
I have one question that I think you can answer, and maybe Josh can shed light on also.
Stand by you.
And I've talked to James Russell a little bit about this, but a lot of times we bring up the like young age that we all were. So being a 14, 15, 16-year-old, can you talk about what you had to do to like get the Playmore or the Knights of Columbus to like actually put on a show at that age?
I'm gonna start with dumb luck. I mean,
We were a little.
we were a bit older, at the time, but
Sure.
it still applies, dumb luck. Being at the right place at the right time, with the right, mentality and the right, you know, just believe in yourself that, yeah, we can do that. We've never done that, but yeah, we can do that. And then, you know, saying, hey, why don't we just call up, hey, where can we put on a show? Who would allow us to do that? You know, and then calling, saying, hey, we'd like to do this. How much would it cost? And then having money. I think that's the key to it. And then just getting that lined up. So to answer that question, I think a lot of it's just confidence, cash, and an opportunity.
I
I have
was gonna answer
nothing.
that one.
Okay.
I've already-
Community cash?
I-
From the outset, yeah. So, the needing money part, I mean, that was always the big thing was, I oftentimes took the cash at the door. And out of that cash, we had to pay the rent. And then maybe the bands would get a little bit of money. And as someone who grew up in town with a doctor for a dad, you know, oh, your boyfriend's doing this band thing, is he gonna make money? Is he getting paid? Is he getting paid? I'm like, no, it was never, ever about the bands getting paid. I mean, yeah, we wanted money for gas, for food, you know, for instruments, but it was never about the band's making money in Rochester. The dream was always to hit it big someday, but it was never about making money at the door.
Or having enough money to put on the next show.
Laura, do you want to come back up here for a second? I want to follow up
You should probably just
something
stay
over
there.
here.
Right over here.
I think we can all agree that, one of the cool things about all of this was, there's no like rock stardom. It was just like, we're all just a bunch of kids like hanging out doing this. How did you feel like sort of you fit in with all of this as someone who, went to shows and supported and helped and, without picking up an instrument, really?
As an unofficial, eventually official groupie, I guess. My job, like I said, was oftentimes helping at the door, taking the money, the merch girl, selling the t-shirts, selling the tapes and discs if we had them. I think it was with Last Minute Records was the first time I'm like, hey guys, we really should have a lockbox because we're taking money, so I mean, like, there was a little bit of intelligence that came with it. Whenever we talk back about the band days, I think our biggest thing was carrying the earth up the stairs of the warehouse in the cross.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, so there was a whole lot of loading equipment, and in lacrosse, it was
It was like
different-
a 90-degree
Yeah.
angle.
Two story hall, two landing, and then another story. Yeah.
But I don't know if it was Jess or who, whether it was a bass guitar amp, one of them was the heaviest thing, and it just, we called it the earth, carrying that up, but it was always fun, because I was in college at this time, so I was here for about half of the shows, but when I was home on the weekend, there was always a show, and we were always out at the Playmore or wherever they were at, and just being on the sidelines and watching the crowd of kids, and kids, I mean, they were like 5 years younger than me, so yeah, they were kids, but just watching everybody having a great time, and like Toe Jam, and how much they liked the guys in Tang, and how everybody was helping each other out. Everybody was just there having fun. It didn't matter if you were 14 or if you were 20. It was good, clean fun. So yeah. That
Yeah.
is it.
Yeah, that was great. Does anyone else have questions or want to add anything or? Yeah. fine.
So was there, like for aspiring bands that wanted to like make it big, was there a like steps along, like destinations, like was going to Minneapolis like a magnet? Cause I know that like, you remember the song Tool Master from Brainerd?
Yep.
That ballad about a band from Brainerd going to Twin Tone Records or something. Was that a similar?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that is true. So it is about traction and market. When bands are looking to A&R you or whatever, they're looking for how many followers you have, how many people like your music, how many people come to your shows. So you would have to branch out and go to Minneapolis and play, or a larger metro area. And that's what touring's about, to get your following. And once you start out doing a little mini tour like Minneapolis and maybe Duluth and then around, or something small like that, and see how it goes and get to know the clubs and the club owners, and they know you and they know you can bring a draw, and then the next time you come around, and then you branch out further and further and further. I think that's how it's happened forever. And then once the A&R comes knocking, you can say, yeah, I have all this following, and they start sending you things, to say, hey, we're interested. We noticed that when you came here, you drew these many people, or there's word of mouth, and so on and so forth. That's the way it was then. I think the internet's changed all of that and threw it on its head.
Totally.
Because you can self-promote now, and nobody cares if you get a contract because you can do it yourself.
Well, and also the other thing is, you brought up how many followers you have. Now that's literally Facebook followers,
Literal
Twitter
followers.
followers.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not how many people can you bring out to the venue, because who knows anymore.
It shows are secondary to what you produce and how many tweets you get, records you get, or likes. It's totally different now.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
all analytics.
it's crazy. But back then it was how many people, how many
How many
physical
faces
bodies
you saw,
can
yeah.
you?
Well, and the other thing is, I can remember TFA when we were, kind of starting out in like 2002. it was like, oh, we can go play a show in Denver. Like, okay, cool. Let's drive overnight to Denver,
You
play
don't-
3 shows,
You don't know what type of shows. You
We
could
don't-
be in a
yeah,
basement, you could
right.
be in a bar.
literally be in a garage, and then the next night in a basement. But it was just like, cool, let's get in a van, and if 3 people want to see us somewhere,
Then you're driving
then we're driving to, yeah.
all the way out to Washington,
In a hearse.
sleep in a tent. In the woods. Funny story, we saw Seagull Scream Kiss Me there.
Oh,
So
in Washington,
In Washington.
nice.
I got a 7-inch. Anyway.
I got a 10-inch.
But to
Show me.
Ooh,
Bigger, it's bigger.
specifically answer his question, specifically to answer his question, the number 1 goal, I think, of probably any Minnesota band, be it Rochester, be it wherever, is gonna be First Avenue. And that's too close. That's 7th Street entry, which is smaller. And if you hit it playing 7th Street entry coming out of Rochester, that was huge. But if you got to play the main room, that was it.
Did you ever play the main?
we did, we played the main room and the entry.
But how many people?
Yeah, we're not gonna count that.
Yeah, if there's 3 people that want.
But when we played the main room, there was somebody that came up and said, "That was great, guy." Somebody's like, "Oh, that's awesome. Do you have any material?" And we're like, "Not really." So, like, to buy. I think that also happened at the Fine Line when we played there. I think it was the Fine Line, maybe it's the Turf. Anyway, but the goal was to not just play in town, although we love playing in town because it's something when you're playing the original song and people are singing along to it. That's a trip. But to get out in front of other people to present your material again before the time of the internet, where you can just throw it out there and millions of people can hear it. The goal is to traction.
There is, playing to those 3 or 10 people out of town is great. But when you have a room full of people like singing your songs back at you, requested, like, that's a feeling that's really like,
How do you know
holy,
that
how do
song?
you know that's like, we haven't even released that. Do we just play that much? You know it?
And speaking of the Playmore, one show we played with Arc Welder, and I remember, on stage playing, and we could see the speaker towers swaying and them holding them up so they wouldn't fall down because the floor was literally bouncing.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
It was like a trampoline in there.
Yeah, it was like a trampoline. It's crazy. Anyway.
Every band that came down, played Playmore, every single one of them just raved about the crowds and showed up in Rochester because they weren't playing the crowds that bad, because they were, just one of many bands playing many different venues. But they come down here and it's like,
He's right.
The appetite for live music, for live original music that wasn't radio play was huge in Rochester. And like to Mike's point, there's 1,000,001 bands in Minneapolis, so everyone's jaded and they just kind of stand like I'm standing right now. Look at you with a blank stare. But down here, the crowds were interactive and they were really into it because they were really excited because they didn't have that all the
They
time.
were all ages.
All ages.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I,
really important, 'cause, we had teens there.
Yeah, kids and adults and everything.
The film festival that I programmed, we did a screening with the Like Hell documentary a couple of years ago at the Parkway up in Minneapolis. And I was talking to the Like Hell guys afterwards, and I was like, I've been a fan of you since I was in high school when I saw you at the Playmore.
Mhm.
And they were like, we still talk about that. Like, those were some of our favorite shows we ever played. And, this is a band that they toured with Velvet Revolver and Queens of the Stone Age. And still, like, that's how much Rochester meant to them was, just getting a room full of kids who were just stoked.
Really something special, honestly.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to know anything or?
You want to know anything?
Want to know
Any
anything?
questions about anything? Have any questions?
Yeah.
And hopefully not inappropriate question. I'm in recovery and I just moved to Rochester like a year and a half ago or so for recovery to start to work from the cities, and I grew up in Pittsburgh and I've been around, like you talked about, like around the scene without actually being in bands and stuff. And I what I'm, like, the all ages aspect and the good, clean fun, somebody said,
No,
and
that's-
like, I'm just wondering
So
what
I think what you're,
substances have.
We really didn't have many problems. I mean, yeah, there were kids smoking pot.
Mhm.
And I mean, and Rochester does have issues. I mean, there were drugs in Rochester, there still are. But our shows, I mean, there might be a couple of kids with some hip flasks or something like that.
A little bit of
Cop-
acid.
Cops never showed up.
but
Drank way too much in the parking lot.
With-
threw
with
up,
any-
went to bed, got drunk.
I think with any subset of anything, whether it be music or art or playing frisbee, there's gonna be a certain amount of people that use or abuse. I think it was no different in our scene, but it wasn't widespread.
Yeah.
I think it was
Yeah.
more, the exception than the norm.
We never had security.
Yeah,
We never had to have
we
security.
never really had-
I can't remember a single, there might have been one show where cops showed up at the end, but other than when they kicked you out of the bar for playing too loud.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sure, down like those.
But that was downtown, but I don't remember any time when the cops had to come into the Playmore and shut anything down. I mean, we never had fights that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, and like,
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
really, I mean, like later, I think later on in like the 2000s, I know there were some other things that sort of crept in. And things got a little dark for some people, but that was all, it was almost like a lot of people were like afraid to let people know about that, you know, it wasn't like out there really, it was more just something people did behind the closed doors of their own place, you know? And again, like I said, not to say that there weren't, you know, issues and stuff like that. You put alcohol in any situation with a bunch of kids and yeah, people are gonna throw up and pass out and get sick.
We don't really see that much.
So there was, no, and
Really,
that's what I was gonna say, like, thankfully there was, you know, we never had really any of those major incidents where it was like, you know, drunk driving deaths or stuff like that, so.
no, and if you did have the kids throwing up, their friends took care of
Well, the Playmore itself.
Correct.
You dances.
It
right
was,
down in the
yeah.
Parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
perhaps, yeah. I think again, if you have kids at a football game, you can have alcohol.
You know, in the sixties, it was strictly 7-Up and
Mhm.
when they had the young people's dances on Thursday nights. It was
Yeah.
strictly 7-Up.
Ours is 50 cent.
Yeah, 50 cent water.
50 cent water.
No, looking back, not that deal.
They weren't. They would sell you Coke to mix with whatever.
Those had to have been the early shows though.
It's pretty
Yeah.
quickly, word got out that,
Yeah.
10-year-olds are bringing in bottles of rum. They, but nothing horrible came out.
Yeah.
Continue to sell $5 guys.
$5 Dixie. Yeah.
So-
That was great knowing the drummer, because he always had soda in his drum.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys can answer this, but do you know why there was never any real effort on part of club owners and siblings to buy original music?
well, there was the 921.
I mean, like established. Like a
Oh.
Kathy's or a North Star or something like that.
They do now, I mean.
Yeah.
As other bands.
It was, well, I think,
played there.
again, like being a teenager at this time,
I think that's part of it.
Um,
It's the age.
it's the age thing, and you know, cover bands will make you money. Like people want to hear the songs that they know. You know, they want to hear
Because they're not there to study
special.
music, they're there to
Right.
do other things and then maybe catch a band. But they're not
And
there
I
to-
think the bigger bands that got brought in, like Mark Welder and Faves and Toyland and Baruch Assault and stuff, they weren't standard radio play. And
Yeah.
most of the bars in town, like the North Star and CJ's, yeah, I mean, they're country music or pop music. I mean, there wasn't even really a whole lot of live music
Yeah.
unless it was a cover band. So it just, the market, I guess, wasn't there, or they didn't realize of the potential market.
And even now, right now, there's not really a good place for a young band starting out to play,
Mhm.
other than a record store.
Yeah, totally.
Because they're not gonna let, I've never heard of you, nobody's heard of you, and nobody gets a chance, so. For the music scene in Rochester, I think that's kind of a bummer. And that's why it was so great that we had, first the Playmore and then Mike Thompson and putting on shows at Knights of Columbus or
Manville Social Club.
Mountain Social Club or any,
Yeah.
any of those venues. So now it's just an older demographic that might play mostly covers and a few originals.
I think the other thing now is like, and I could be partially wrong, but now it's like it's so easy to just put your stuff up online on SoundCloud or Spotify or Apple Music that you don't necessarily need to play live shows. Like I've seen some artists play and they play to it, not even to like a backing track. It's just like I'm gonna play my song and I'm gonna sing along to it with the vocals on the song. So it's a different.
It's like a shower.
Yeah.
I think. I think part of it too is like.
As someone who's supporting it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, but I'm playing music to my own. No, but I think now, like, when it comes to like that music being played, it's way more popular. Like the alternative isn't alternative, really. It's just mainstream, different than pop music.
Yeah.
So I think it's much more accepted. So you're gonna see more bands like that at bars and stuff, because they do play that stuff on the radio now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like if you wanted to hear any of those bands that we've mentioned, like the only station that was ever gonna play them was KRPR. And it was if
Between
they
9
knew-
o'clock and 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
between 2 hours.
Yeah, I think the landscape of music has changed, how music's done has changed. But there's never gonna be anything like being at a live show with a bunch of people, either as a musician or as participant in the crowd, along with everyone.
Yeah.
It's nothing's gonna replace that. Just going to some shows recently, it is coming back, but.
But it's not, I was just gonna say, it says the shows, the cities obviously has more venues, more opportunity for people to play, but you don't see the young do-it-yourself. I mean, even if you look at the 7th Street entry calendar list, it's not young and up and coming bands the way it used to be.
But what is interesting is there's like a legit, real, like underground, like house shows and basement shows and backyard shows of like these young 20-something, and a lot of them it's a lot of women, it's a lot of queer people, it's a lot of trans kids, and it's awesome because it's like they're in it like we were in
They
it.
find their sense of community and their
Yeah.
sense of belonging and awesome.
Yeah, it's great to see. Like,
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to like the album art and the poster art, like if that was
Yeah.
something that the band had a lot of, like how it was even created.
How was that
That's
created?
that's so fun to do.
So a lot, a lot of it I did myself just because I could. I did go to art school for a year, but that was a wasted year in my opinion. But I had the means. I had a computer. I had a workstation that I could to do this. A lot of the bands just did it themselves, either on a Xerox machine. I think our first tape I did on a Xerox.
This one.
Is
I
it?
just saw the.
One was some photo paper that we just put a developer on, and I just drew on the developer and then put it on a
I think
machine.
in the folder you gave me, I have some of the like
Yeah.
early like proofs and
Proofs and they're cut and paste.
yeah.
On the computer.
I mean, that's
Actually telling our daughter, as we're looking at the flyers back there, that you can see the progress from cut and paste, which is, used
To
in
Photoshop.
editing
you can
software,
Yeah.
where you can see that someone literally cut out all the letters and pasted them, and then you took it to Kinko's. And then we started getting Photoshop and Illustrator, and so you can see that things kind of progress with, the graphic ability. Mike.
Not for this guy.
But that's cool again.
Yeah.
And Mike Dignan was just telling us he's got our screen prints from our original Tang,
Actual screen prints.
Tang t-shirts that we did ourselves and hung up on the rafters in the basement before a show.
Supposed to
So,
put the light bulb.
yep.
at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the bands, just, they had a vision. They said, hey, can you do this? For Last Minute Records, I was the guy that with the stuff, so they,
There's
I
a
could send my
definite-
way.
You can see, the ones that you.
I remember
Yeah,
meeting when I was doing the system.
This one.
Yeah, the Tesla cover, they were there, and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, hey, how about I flip this, throw some color on it and highlight that? And they're like, cool. And I'm like, done. So, literally how that happened.
But then here, write the names of the songs.
Yeah, but I'm like, no, I need you to write the names of the songs. Oh, yeah, so that one was a struggle, but it was quick. And some bands had everything, and I just kind of laid it out. They had their art and their vision. I just kind of laid it out. But for some of it, I just talked to them and like, what are you thinking? You have color palette you like?
I think there is something to be said for, record being an entire package. It's not just a group of songs. It's the layout, it's the liner notes, it's the lyrics, it's the cover art, it's all of that. It's
an experience.
It's an experience. It's an art package. Yeah.
This is why I collect vinyl again.
Yeah.
That was one thing that Tang did with their first cassette. Is I can't remember how many. I mean, we copied those two, didn't we? They put hidden messages in the tapes.
Yeah, I remember handwriting each one of those with something different. Like, who's gonna ever read this? And I just write about just random stuff. Mike was there. He's like,
And then stickers was the fun one too.
stickers were fun.
Yeah.
Stickers, we would literally print stickers on labels, computer print labels, and then we would cover them with packing tape so that they.
Oh, so they're fun. Yeah.
Yep.
I think back there we still have a bunch of stalemate stickers that they're free. They're free, so go back and grab them. I think Kermit the Frog is on there.
Take a picture of it, tag Rob in the photo. He'd love it.
Well, I don't know how much time we got, but we can probably start wrapping this up. I feel like we've been up here for a million hours, but thank you again to everyone for coming out and for supporting this project and
And a big thanks to these guys especially, because I thought all this stuff was lost to time. And I would never see it again and nobody would ever care. And I was fine with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But now seeing it.
That's why we put together a video of you like 5 shots. Yeah.
A clue, but not really. So
Yeah.
because she goes to live shows and she really likes them. So to see that, hey, yeah, you can do your own thing.
Yeah.
You can be your own you.
Yeah.
You can be successful at it, and
It's pretty cool.
it's really cool. And you can find people that love it too. So, but a big thanks to these guys. Give them a big round of applause here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna add to him. I also really want to thank the Olmsted County Historical
Yeah,
Society. Because there is something about being recognized and acknowledged.
A legitimacy to it.
Legitimacy.
100% validation.
What we do, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Validation.
I gotta give props to.
Yeah, everyone here is thank you for coming out. Yeah.